Good morning.
Good morning.
All right. Shall we begin?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started.
All right, let's call the MPO Policy Committee meeting to order. And let's remember, this is all being live streamed. And in order for attendees to hear, make sure you unmute your microphone like I just did. Identify yourself if you're making a motion or a comment, so we can capture who is making the motion. For those attending in person, please be sure to sign the sign-in sheet that's located just outside in the hallway. If you'd like to make a public comment, please fill out the public comment card and return it to a staff member. They're all around you, floating around. For those participating via Zoom, please keep your microphone on mute unless you're called upon to speak. When appropriate on the agenda, we'll request comments from those online, and you can indicate your desire to speak through the chat box. Staff is monitoring the Zoom and will recognize you when it's time to speak. So with all that, would Aaron please call the roll?
Will do. All right. I will also ask that if you could identify yourself as I call the agency name for the initial minutes here. IDOT,
Secretary Gia Biaggi.
CDOT,
Big Christian Murthy here on behalf of Commissioner Carney.
CMAP, Beal,
Frank Beal for CMAP.
CMAP President Brawley.
Here.
Thank you. Class 1 railroads. Cook County,
Jesse Elam, representing Superintendent Siskillen.
thank you. Council of Mayors.
Jeff Shelkey, Chairman, Council of Mayors.
Thank you, Mayor Schilke. CTA,
Molly Poppy, representing Acting President Learson.
thank you. DuPage County,
Bill Edson, Division of Transportation.
thank you. FHWA, FTA,
Mark Kane for Kelly Brookins.
Illinois State Toll Highway Authority,
Executive Director Cassandra Rouse.
Kane County,
I'm Richard here, representing Chair for.
Kendall County, Lake County,
Good morning, Shane Schneider, representing County Board Chair Hart.
thank you. McHenry County,
Drew Duffin, representing Chair Bueller.
Metra,
Lynette Civarella representing Jim Dewinski.
Pace,
Eric Luong, representing Chairman Kwasniewski.
RTA,
Leanne Redden.
Will County. Okay,
All right, thank you. Appears we have a quorum. We did receive requests from Mayor Bradley to participate remotely.
yep. In addition to Mayor Brawley, we've also got Shane Snyder representing Lake County requesting remote participation.
Okay, Mayor Bradley, excuse me. So in order to participate remotely, it requires a majority voice vote to comply with the Open Meetings Act. So can I get a motion to approve virtual participation? So moved. All right, so moved by Leanne, second by Mayor Schilke. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, opposed? All right, the ayes have it. The vote passes. Let us mark them present and able to participate on matters of the committee. All right, item 2, agenda changes and announcements. There are no changes to the agenda. But I will take this moment. There's one change, which is now I'm behind this microphone here. So again, I'm Gia Biaggi. I'm the new acting secretary at the Illinois Department of Transportation. It's a delight to be back. I previously worked at the Chicago Department of Transportation, along with folks like Big Krishnamurti and Commissioner Carney and many of you around the table. So it's an important moment for the state of Illinois. I think we have an opportunity to work together on these issues that we can't face alone, whether that's figuring out what we do on transit, whether that's how we can get our capital projects done in a timely way and reach communities all over the state. That's the way, we're thinking about the whole state, but certainly this Northeast section is critical to the fortunes, not only Illinois, but to the nation itself, right? As the Chicagoland and counties and Northeast Illinois and the rest of the state go, so goes the United States in terms of goods and services and people and economic development. So I appreciate being part of this group and all the participation that I know you'll bring and working together over the next however long. So thank you for that. All right. Item 3 is approval of minutes. You each have the minutes from January 9th in your packet. Can I get a motion to approve the January 9th, 2025 meeting minutes?
So moved by Mayor Shelkey.
Moved by Mayor Shelkey, second?
Second.
Second by Director Cassandra, sorry, from the tollway. Can I get a motion? Let's see. Is there any discussion? Excuse me. No discussion? All in favor of passing the minutes? Say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? All right. Oh, aye. I'm going too fast. All right, the motion carries. And now we'll move on to CMAP announcements.
Great. I'll kick us off with some announcements from the agency and the region here. I want to welcome you all to our March meeting. It feels like March a little bit outside, so that's also a positive. I also want to personally welcome Secretary Biaggi for joining us here at the regional MPO table, but also excited about the leadership that she brings to the Illinois Department of Transportation. I think we really at CMAP, and I know IDOT too, is really focused on making sure that our transportation system works for everyone and also considers the needs of all of the residents of our region. And so for that, we are looking forward to continuing to partner with you to make sure that we have an accessible, resilient transportation system here. Also happy to share some updates from the CMAP team. One of the things that we have been watching, as I imagine all of you have, is that this is our first meeting since the start of the new administration. I want to briefly just bring up a couple items of note related to presidential executive orders and DOT orders and the impact on our work and operations as well. So again, it's an involving situation. We've been monitoring sort of the information that keeps continuing to come out on a daily level here. And I think, again, recognizing that there are lawsuits in order, I think we may not have answers on a lot of issues as quickly as we would like them to be here. But I think, when sort of the executive order started to roll out, there was some freezes on transportation funding. Those have been resolved and thawed. We are anxious to gain some clarity around some of our discretionary grants so we can continue work. I want to thank you, the partners that we're working with, the county partners that we're working with on the Safe Streets for All program. We are continuing to move that project forward at this point in time, but recognizing that some of the executive orders have taken away the Justice 40 activities that we had originally applied for. We have reduced and changed the scope of that work at this point in time to help make sure that we hit the deadline of June 30th for those to be complete, but also to make sure that our counties continue to be eligible for competitive funds that help address safety needs in their counties as well. We are also partners with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus and the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant project as well. That project remains sort of uncertain. We are doing the eligible work activities on the transportation side, but that work was really looking comprehensively at all of our industry sectors that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. And so for the time being, we are paused on sort of that broader look at greenhouse gas emissions reduction as well. Again, I think there are many other executive orders that impact CMAP as a primarily federally funded agency here, but we do appreciate our partners being supportive of our continued work here at the regional level. I know many of you are aware that our federal highway and federal transit partners have experienced reductions in staff. Again, I think from our perspective, we want to do everything we can to streamline the work that we're doing that has to go to them to make their jobs easier, but also want to recognize that we want to make sure that our projects continue to move forward. So finding a balance between that communication and the needs and things to be processed is something that's top of mind for us. We don't want to impede the direct movement of projects, capital projects and programming across the region. So paying close attention to that as well. We are aware that some of the guidance that we have, I'll just ask if folks online could make sure to mute their microphones here. But we're in sort of this interim period. A number of the guiding documents that we've seen from USDOT to FHWA say that like within 10 days of the guidance, the administration must develop a list of projects. The following 10 days, they must sort of identify projects that are not complying with executive orders. And then sort of there's this 30-day period where they will start to make some changes. Yesterday, we heard from AMPO, our Association of MPOs, that grants that came out post January 20th moving forward are going into this review bucket to try and understand whether or not they include resiliency economic equity programs, and other things that have sort of been dissolved, I'll say. And so we know that this is ongoing. Again, I think we're trying to pay close attention again to if you have contracts that are not signed, grant awards that are not obligated, and you don't have current grant agreements, we're trying to get our arms around what we have across the region that is potentially at risk, so that we can be in close communication with our congressional delegation offices as well. We want to make sure that we are accurately reporting what has been awarded but not received. And so, again, my staff would love to talk with you if you have projects that are sort of missing that final grant agreement here, so that we can sort of put those numbers together on the regional level here. I'll also note we don't have any further guidance on how DOT policies related to birth rates and marriage rates higher than the national average will impact our funding or our priorities here. Again, those are things that have been put out there, but again, we don't have any direction on how to utilize that at this point in time, so we are not actively taking measures to change anything at this point in time. We are appreciative of folks who communicated with elected officials about the STIP and TIP changes needing to go up to USDOT. We are glad that that is now going to continue to stay at the local state offices again. That just sort of creates this sort of waiting list for our projects to move forward. So that had happened last week. We're appreciative that it's now the authority has been delegated back down to the office in the state. We'll continue to monitor these changes. We did send out a summary document about a week or two ago. We're probably at the point where we have enough new information that we're going to be updating those summary documents, sending it to our planning liaison programs, the Council of Mayors, to the counties. And so we'll try and keep you up to speed on what we know when we know it and how it impacts our work. So just a couple other things that I wanted to share with you here. Last month, the CMAP board approved our annual budget and work plan for fiscal year 2026, which starts on July 1st. It really describes all of the work that we do here. And I know that you all are familiar with sort of the work that happens under the Unified Work Program. But there's a lot of good stuff that we're excited about happening this next year, including stuff that you'll hear about today, the congestion management plan, the continued work on our regional transportation plan. I also wanted to share a quick preview of a report that we have coming out next week. We have been working with a coalition of Illinois policy and civic leaders to release a report that's called Modernizing Illinois Sales Tax, which outlines how the General Assembly can think about critical reforms to the sales tax formula to secure a stronger fiscal future for Illinois. Again, the report talks about how we got to this point, but we really got into this work because of our work on transit. You know, when we were developing the part report, that three-legged stool is the vision, the governance, and the funding happening together. You know, we recognize that asking for $1.5 billion is a huge ask, and we wanted to think about how legislators could help come up with those revenue sources, and one of which is taking our sales tax and looking at it not just on goods, but really thinking about broadening it, modernizing it, and doing what many states nearby have done, is that look at the sales tax on services here, which we don't have a comprehensive system for. This has been a long-standing recommendation for CMAP since the beginning of our organization in 2005. It was included in the 2040 plan. Again, we think there's some opportunities here that we should be talking to the legislature about. And so you'll see that come out in the next week or so. And I'm excited to share that information with our legislators. And then our call for projects for technical assistance is now open. So if you have communities that you're working with that would benefit from working with ourselves or the RTA, that we do this in partnership every year, that is open, and our staff are available to answer questions as well. So it's not sort of a, you know, you can't talk to us during the process. We want to help share information with communities so that they develop programs or applications that would help meet their needs in a meaningful way. Other than that, the My Daily Travel Household Survey does continue. We are hoping to get 4,000 households to give us this information about how they travel to help calibrate our future transportation models. So that is underway as well. And then Happy to also announce too that we have updated the Northeastern Illinois Priority Investments booklet, which highlights our biggest projects that we think are most competitive and most important to the nation's transportation system. So my final note here is just on a positive note here. The work that we have done the past couple of years as a region has yielded some pretty high benefits. We have seen about $1.27 billion in federal funding for transportation projects come to the region in 2024 through those discretionary grant programs. And so, again, I think that is due in large part to the partnerships that we have around this table and really speaks to the meaningful investments in our infrastructure here. And those dollars will go a long way. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you for the report, Erin. There's a lot in there. But again, please take advantage of the offer to get technical assistance from CMAP and RTA and others. Next we have item 4.02, and this is our CMAP board update from Leanne Redden from RTA.
Thank you. As your liaison to the CMAP board, there's been 2 CMAP board meetings since we last met. So at the January meeting, approved changes to the bylaws that mirror the updated language that was in the Regional Planning Modernization Act. And it allows for the simple majority vote of the board for all actions regarding contracts, but excludes the executive director's contract, grants, purchase agreements, and meetings, etc. They also approved the 2025-26 federal and state advocacy agenda, and we're going to hear a bit more about that. I think Erin also noted that in her summary. The board is also received the 2024 CMAP annual report, which shared information on the progress it's making towards 2024 for the region's shared vision and the ONTO 2050 goals. At the February meeting, we received a 2024 financial audit in which CMAP received a clean, unmodified opinion, the highest level of assurance that the audit could provide. And as Erin also noted already, that the board approved the proposed 2025 budget and work plan. Also approved the federal performance targets on roadway safety, highway asset condition targets were also approved by the MPO Policy Committee at, hopefully at its, no, we did that at the January last meeting. Yes, correct. The board meeting was canceled for March 12th. So that concludes my report.
All right. Thank you. Are there any questions? No? Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to item 4.03, Mayor Shelkey and the Council of Mayors report.
Thank you very much. The Council of Mayors, just so everybody understands, we have representatives from each of the 11 sub-regional councils are on the Council of Mayors. We last met in this room on March 4th, and I had this job as the chairman now for some time, and I will tell you that I've never had as many inquiries and calls as I have over probably the last 3 or 4 weeks from fellow mayors wanting to know what we think is going to happen to federal money. Is it grants and all the other stuff? So that's the big question out there amongst the mayors, and the staff, I think, will has done a very good job with it. But as our executive director just indicated, there's a lot of unknowns yet on the table. At our last meeting, we recognized 4 of our members who are not seeking re-election, and the mayoral election is on April Fool's Day this year, April 1st. And those who are leaving us are Mayor Tom Hayes from Arlington Heights, Mayor Karen Darch from Barrington, Mayor Greg Lummis from Northfield, and Mayor George Van Dusen of Skokie. And I just want to say that as chairman, these are 4 people that really have been a very strong voice on the Council of Mayors. And I'm very, very sorry to lose them, because they, at a moment when we probably need strong voices, we're losing 4 of the good ones. So we did a little thing to honor them, and we appreciate their good efforts. At our March meeting, we also included a lively discussion of electric vehicles and the infrastructure needed to support them and the resources for municipalities. We had Representative Christina Bertero from ComEd and Edith Mackerel from the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus led us in this discussion. Now, I just have an extra, this isn't on my minutes here, but I have an extra story I need to share with you to let you know kind of what's going on here. I don't know, I wake up in the middle of the night and I say to myself, why me? Batavia was the recipient about a year ago. We had a Sam's Club that went out, was like most of the rest of them, was taken out of business. The building's 187,000 square feet. And about 9 months ago, one day, Tesla shows up and indicates that they want to move into this building, but they don't need the whole thing. They only need 50,000 square feet, and there's 120,000 extra. So the city council and myself had to agree to rezone the building to allow for the rest of it to become a rental storage facilities where you can come in and rent spaces. So Tesla then comes and says to us, well, we're not in any hurry to open this up. We're going to wait till next year when the new cars are made, and we're going to have this as kind of the show space for those to do it. So they now have gone out and they've painted the building in different colors. So the front of it is a blue, and I guess that's where Tesla is going to be. They've taken off the front, so there'll be a bunch of nice showrooms and everything in it. And it's going along very nicely. Well, then it comes out quite actively who owns Tesla and all the things that are being done in the federal government right now by the gentleman that owns Tesla. So in my community, in the last, I'd say, 3 or 4 weeks, we have received multiple inquiries from what the city of Batavia requires to hold demonstrations or protests at locations. Now, this is an interesting site because the front parking lot is all privately owned. So we can say, well, you can't have a demonstration there, but right to the south of it, we have a major street that runs along the south side of the building. And I've already had one show up and want to put up a rat and balloon and all this other stuff. And so we are anticipating when Tesla opens up and puts themselves into business there, we're going to be quite the showplace for demonstrations. And so I don't know what that means or where it goes. It's all about the guy that owns Tesla, and they're trying to get the message across. So I think there's several other Tesla dealers. I haven't talked to the mayors in the other towns where they are, but we probably should have a meeting. But I just wanted to share this with you that this electric vehicle thing is becoming quite a big thing. We're wondering too, Commonwealth Edison, I think, is kind of trying to gear up on having the power to power a whole bunch of new electric vehicles. And so they're in the works to do that. The state of Illinois had a ban on nuclear reactor expansion for a while, but now they've backed off on that. And so I am told that they will allow some additional nuclear reactors to be brought into the area. And I think if the electric vehicle really takes off the way it looks like it might, there's going to be a need for those, because you're going to have everybody coming home at night and plugging in their car in their garage, and the electric system, as they tell me, gets kind of a relief from about 10 at night to about 5 in the morning. There's not as much use. But now if you plug in all these cars that you're charging overnight, you're going to really keep the system rolling. So there's probably going to be a need in the region for some of these smaller nuclear reactors, because right now the Chicagoland area is being serviced by Braidwood, Byron, and Morris are the 3 places where the real reactors are that are generating most of the power for us. And we're all on the national grid, so they can move more and more power in, but there's going to be a significant increase in the need for electrical power because of the electric vehicle. So I'm glad that CMAP has taken kind of a leadership role in this and kind of keeping an eye on it, because suddenly, as the chairman, I'm getting calls, and I'm sure the staff is here too, about, what's the answers to some of these electric vehicle questions. And nobody else has the thing I got going, where I got this new dealership where we're going to be able to protest, but that's a whole nother story. But I just share that with you because lots happening. And it's a lot on the, at the federal level. So our next meeting for the Council of Mayors, which I think will be a lively discussion, is going to be in June. And that's my report.
All right. Well, thank you for the report and for the additional stories about what's going on. I think it is really helpful to know what the conversation is. So thanks for sharing them. Are there any questions? No? All right. Thank you so much. Hearing none. I think we're on to 5.0 informational items and 5.01, which is an update on the regional transportation plan.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Tomto. I'm a principal policy analyst here at CMAP. I use he, him pronouns. The primary focus of today's update will really be focused on the emerging priorities report. And I'll have the project manager for that work, Julie Reschke, up here to present on it. But before I hand it over to her, wanted to share some general updates of the various other streams of work underway to develop the RTP. So as you may recall from previous discussions, the Emerging Priorities Report work has been progressing in parallel to the existing conditions research. This effort is an initial step to understand what's top of mind for our implementing partners and other regional partners and stakeholders throughout the region. It involved a review of more than 30 plans from state, regional, county, and local agencies, as well as a scan of regional planning activities currently underway at agencies like CMAP and the RTA. Additionally, numerous one-on-one conversations with partners across the region have helped shape this effort. The emerging priorities work establishes the initial goals and objectives for the RTP and has helped us identify key areas where further research on existing conditions and future needs is needed. At your next meeting, we'll present on that existing conditions research, which together with the emerging priorities report will help set the stage for identifying strategies that will be included in the final plan. So beyond that emerging priorities report and existing conditions work, other key work streams have been advancing. So this includes work on regional capital projects, or RCPs. This is the term we've used to replace what we formerly referred to as regionally significant projects, or RSPs. So staff have begun collecting project information from our implementing partners, and we continue to work with our resource group to refine the evaluation criteria to evaluate those projects. Additionally, for the financial plan, work continues to develop the baseline revenue forecast. A second financial plan resource group meeting was held and focused on early assumptions for that baseline forecast and kicked off discussions on what reasonably expected revenues should be included in the plan. So it's not shown here on the slide, but we also have work underway for the congestion management strategy. This is working to update our regional congestion management process. So this work has been moving quickly. There's a separate resource group for that work. And that team is currently working to identify and prioritize congestion management strategies, which will ultimately feed into the broader set of strategies that we include in the regional transportation plan. Noah Harris, the project manager for the congestion management strategy work, is actually the next agenda item. And so I'll leave it to him to provide a more detailed update of what's happening in that space. So finally, want to touch on stakeholder engagement and public outreach. This past year, we've had robust efforts underway to reach out to, again, all of our partner agencies, advocacy groups, civic organizations, community organizations, and the like. But 2025 is really where we see a ramp up in this engagement activities, where we have more of a public outreach emphasis. This includes the development of an engagement site, which is live on CMAP's website. On this site, it includes informational video that provides kind of a RTP 101. Why does this matter? What do we do with it? It also includes a questionnaire that we recently released and have already received almost 500 responses just in that short time that it's been out already. That questionnaire is available in both Spanish and English. And additionally, there is a portal available on that site where organizations or individuals can submit research or memos or other ideas that they think should be considered in the regional transportation plan. The engagement site also includes frequently asked questions space, as well as meeting notes and slide decks from all of the various resource groups that are meeting to help advance the work. And so with that, I will hand it over to Julie, who will walk us through the emerging priorities report.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Julie Reschke. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a senior analyst here in the policy division at CMAP. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about some of the emerging priorities coming out of the RTP. Next slide, please. So as Ryan just outlined, 2025 will be quite a busy year for the RTP. The first half of this year is dedicated to building consensus around our regional vision for transportation and assessing the current state of play in some key goal areas. After the summer, we'll take all this information and use it to inform strategic discussions about how we'll implement the goals that we have for transportation. And the Emerging Priorities Report, which is included in your agenda packet, marks a milestone deliverable for the RTP, outlining high-level goals and objectives that reflect early research and feedback from stakeholders like the agencies and organizations that you all represent. Next slide, please. So before we get into the proposed RTP goals, I'd like to share some details about this report. The document serves as a snapshot in time to summarize key themes and priorities highlighted in early stages of research and development. The report builds off current and ongoing regional planning efforts like On to 2050, and it reflects input from stakeholders like transportation agencies, county partners, advocacy organizations, and CMAP board and committees. As such, much of the content is likely already familiar to you as it represents long-standing transportation priorities and topics we've discussed together for quite some time. And while the report is a milestone deliverable that helps us make progress defining key goal areas in the RTP, please note that the final plan is where we'll work together as a region to solidify these details. Today, I'll be presenting a summary of what we've heard so far and to hear from you about anything that's on your mind, feedback, considerations, or questions. So the Emerging Priorities Report identifies 5 goal areas, which you can see reflected on the screen. These goals are to strengthen connections between people and places, prioritize safety and public health, mitigate pollution and invest in resilient infrastructure, support economic prosperity and inclusive growth, and strategically govern, fund, and preserve the system. For the remainder of my presentation, I'll walk through these slides one by one, and we'll have time at the discussion for feedback and questions. Next slide, please. So the first goal here is about improving how people experience the transportation system. Objectives highlight the need for strategies to improve travel time reliability, intelligent transportation systems or ITS technologies, multimodal access options and flexibility across all modes, and transportation facilities and infrastructure that are fully ADA compliant. And while there's a focus on travel within the region, this goal area can also support the need for better connections into and out of the region through intercity bus and rail. The region has already provided an abundance of plans and studies to support these objectives, including examples like the RTA's Transit is the Answer, CMAP's Mobility Recovery, and county transportation plans focused on the bike and pedestrian network. Additionally, the congestion management strategy, which you'll hear about shortly, will also further help inform the development of this goal area. Next slide, thank you. Safety continues to be a significant regional priority. Data and residents' lived experiences have emphasized the need to better manage speeds on our roadways. Additionally, local and countywide initiatives have supported a more comprehensive approach to planning our transportation corridors in order to prevent crashes. And by providing safe and abundant opportunities to use active transportation, these priorities also support public health. However, we heard from stakeholders that some of our communities experience disproportionate burdens from transportation, including through factors like air pollution, noise levels, or safety risks. We heard interest in using the RTP space to further explore these challenges and identify strategies to improve disparate outcomes in public health. The region's natural resources are a critical asset that supports essential ecosystems here, fosters public health, and makes Northeastern Illinois an attractive travel destination. On to 2050 sets transportation-specific strategies to protect these resources and reduce harmful pollution from the transportation sector, especially through emissions. And since the adoption of On to 2050 in 2018, stakeholders like yourselves have committed to these goals and made investments to advance them. Current and ongoing climate plans continue to highlight the need to reduce pollution from transportation and to make our transportation assets more resilient to extreme conditions like storms, flooding, and intense heat and cold. Moving forward, stakeholders have indicated that they're looking to the RTP to provide alignment across these efforts and to continue advancing our shared goals. So a message we heard, especially from our county partners and some one-on-one meetings, is that transportation strategies should not be a one-size-fits-all. Our communities have unique economic and land use needs that are shaped by their local market conditions, nearby industries, and unique transportation needs. There's interest in using the RTP to explore approaches that align transportation priorities with local development needs, ensuring that investments support economic growth, job creation, and transportation or sector-specific transportation needs. In particular, our freight network has a significant impact on our regional economy. Stakeholders feel positively about the progress the CREATE program has made and would like to see more improvements that enhance the efficiency of freight operations. At the same time, however, we've heard about challenges to balance freight activity with impacts to nearby communities. Government partners are interested in using the RTP to explore strategies to better balance freight efficiency with community well-being. And finally, for the last goal area here, I think we all know that our region has a legacy transportation system with many historic assets requiring significant investment to maintain and modernize. Both research and stakeholder feedback highlighted system preservation as one of the highest priorities for our region's transportation system, with significant needs to increase funding sources, facilitate collaboration, and improve data collection and sharing. Outside of maintaining our current infrastructure, government partners also want to advance new and innovative projects. And some of these project ideas include emerging technologies, which may pose new or unique considerations for the region. To manage these needs and implement the region's vision for transportation, we need sustainable and sufficient funding. Through the RTP's financial plan, we can build off efforts like the Plan of Action for Regional Transit to explore options to improve and expand revenue sources. Next slide, please. And just to wrap up here before we get into discussion, ultimately, the Emerging Priorities Report will help set the foundation for our upcoming work in the RTP. By outlining high-level goals and objectives in this early phase, we can promote greater alignment with subsequent efforts like data analysis, policy development, and the identification of performance metrics. Later this fall, we'll use this information to discuss actions and strategies that will help advance the region's vision for transportation. And at this point, we'd like to turn it over to you and hear if you have any feedback on the proposed goal areas or have other things on your mind that you think we should consider as we look to plan into the future.
Do you have questions? Yes.
Julie, thanks for the report. And, we've looked at this and I know we raised this at Transportation Committee, so I'll raise it again here for the benefit of everybody. I think there's two items as we looked at the report, the Emergent Priority Report, that seem to be I think they need just a little more emphasis and are not reflected within the report. Number one is safety. When we talk about safety, as we read the report, we saw a lot of safety related to bike, ped, and the car. I want to make sure that we're elevating rail crossing safety. There are a number of rail crossings within northeastern Illinois, and if we can make the rail crossings safer for cars as well as for bike and pedestrians, we would go a long way in that regard. The second one I want to bring up is the discussion, and it'll come up again in the congestion discussion that we're going to have next, is the promoting the national freight network, which we are 100% on board with the CREATE projects and moving those forward. But as we promote the national freight network, we also have to realize that if we want to also encourage commuter and regional rail, we also at Metro need to operate within that infrastructure. So we're going to need to really balance out the infrastructure that's needed for promoting both the national freight network as well as what we're going to need for Metro to expand and offer the regional rail service that everybody in the region wants, because we have to utilize those same tracks. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That's really helpful feedback.
Thank you for that. Are there other comments or questions? Yes.
I guess this is my day to talk at the meeting. I just want to say, number one, I am very impressed and pleased that CMAP and IDOT and others are jumping into this conversation. I say that because I'm the mayor of a town that in the, since 2020 through the end of what we now know is 26, we know the numbers, we're going to add over 800 new living units in Batavia. And I think my two neighbors to the north, Geneva and St. Charles, have some similar types of numbers coming in. We've had some interesting things happen with those numbers. Number one, our traffic backups in town are significantly increasing. We have a lot of times when we got 20, 30, 40 cars sitting at some of our old downtown traffic lights and whatever have you. We had a development stall built now. It took only about a year and a half to build it. 242 units were built on the southeast side of Batavia, adjacent to Fermilab and not far away from the I-88 interchange in Aurora. And what basically has happened there is when you come into Batavia and you want to live there, you have to fill out a form with us so we can send you the bill for water, sewer, and electricity. And on the form it asks, where are you moving here from? So we have some background on that. So we looked at this one that's it's all now, it was totally sold out before it was even hardly even built. I mean, we had, I think, 11 units that were bought before they were ever even under construction. And we find out that over 70% of the people who are moving into that development are coming to us from the city of Chicago. So there's a kind of a transition going on here where a lot of people from the city are moving out into our area. And we find that the reasons being that it's to the north of us, we got 90 in Elgin, and to the south of us, we got 88 in Aurora. So the tollway is a real principal factor. And then the other thing is we've got the Metro and the lines in Aurora, Geneva, and Elgin. So there's a big ability to commute very easily from our area into the city. And that seems to be a very favorable thing. But what we're seeing is that we're getting some interesting groups. In my town, we've gotten this 800 new houses, but we also now have 8 senior living communities. And the 8 senior living communities bring up, obviously, all folks are elderly, and many of them are still driving, and they're slow drivers. So that's another factor that comes into play when you get, as I say, I've got 7, I got another one under construction. So we have a lot of issues going on about the age of the people who are moving in and their driving speeds, if that's the other thing. So what the growth has done in my town is it's caused 2 major problems. One is the traffic issue. And the other one, interestingly, is the need for ambulance service. My fire department now has already responded to over 1,000 calls just this year. And 80% of those are ambulance because of this large senior living community that we have. So I think I'm not alone in suburban mayors that have these issues going on, but there is seemingly a big demand for traffic at Batavia High School now. Our police chief goes out and kind of keeps track of this. We have 667 kids now drive to high school every day. And that's much more than we have a parking lot to hold them. So they're all over the neighborhood, and we've had to involve some no parking areas. And we have a church that's across the street from the high school that has a large parking lot, and they've turned it into a very profitable situation where they rent out spaces, $75 a semester to park your car so you can be right across the street from the high school. But those are kind of some of the things that we're getting into with traffic, but it's become a big issue in my town. And I just share that because I know I'm not alone amongst the suburban mayors and having that. And certainly, we've got some really nice things between the RTA system, which serves us with the bus and with the train, and certainly the tollway at both ends of the county. That's a major factor to have those facilities running into Kane County at both ends of it. So those who planned that really did some nice ideas when they put it in, and with the cooperation of the tollway up at the north end, we've been able to put the bus on the shoulder idea and play, and And we've got a bunch of stuff going on, so it's all cooperative. There's nothing wrong, but there is some big numbers that are moving, and I don't know if it's all new population. It appears there's a lot of reshifting of population taking place in the Chicagoland area. And I happen to be one of the places that's getting the hit.
Now, thank you for sharing that. I think we're seeing that happen all across this region, right? There's a kind of a rebalancing. There's also what makes me feel like this work is very timely, right? Because you're feeling this confluence of what are we going to do to support transit? What are we going to do to reduce and alleviate congestion and get people where they need to be? So I'm appreciative that CMAP is doing this work in this moment. And so we can all kind of rally around how to move forward on some of those objectives. I was curious, so with the emerging priorities, were there particular ones there that were more emergent, shall we say, than others? Like if you were to, were they all equivalently coming across, or were certain categories of those priorities a little more weighty in the responses and information you're collecting?
That's a good question. It was an interesting exercise to even prepare the report because we are taking such a large amount of feedback from research and conversations with people like you all and trying to distill it down into some themes that made sense and were kind of equal weight and importance, at least, as we thought it were in the RTP so far. I would say, most of them were pretty similar to each other, but I do think that state of good repair and system preservation came out really strongly in a lot of conversations. Sort of foresee that being something that continues to come up for the RTP, but I don't know if there's other thoughts there. Erin?
I think one of the other things that I was struck by when the team was briefing me on this was also just really thinking about cybersecurity as in relation to infrastructure, because as all of our infrastructure gets smarter, the potential for it all to be more vulnerable in a way that we haven't had before was something too that the team had mentioned that I thought was striking.
Other questions or comments? Director Rouse?
Yes, I just want to just thank you again for the report, but I did have a question on the strengthening connections area. Is there anything you'd like to just highlight? I'd be interested to see if there's something that kind of jumped out for your team that might be worthwhile for the committee to hear.
Sure, I think I'll start an answer there, but I would also look to the next presentation. The congestion management strategy will do a lot to inform that goal area. Strengthening connections between people and places feels like a really massive topic. We're talking not only about travel time reliability and congestion management, we're also talking about, maybe people's interest in using different modes to get different places and multimodal access of certain locations, ADA compliance. So it is quite a large and weighty topic that we'll need to think about, presenting all of those topics thoughtfully and of equal importance. So I don't know, Erin or Ryan, if there's anything that you would want to highlight, but I mean, some key things that came through there was multimodal access, ADA accessible facilities, some interest in mode shift, people who want to drive a little bit less, maybe use active transportation and transit more. Erin?
Yeah, and I think when we just think about the demography of our region, not only are people sort of shifting around the region, but our region is also aging. And so I think that is also going to be top of mind for us as we think about how do you serve people who maybe don't want to drive, or we might not want somebody to drive. But also, families, and I think it runs the gambit of making sure that our system is addressing all of the stages of life, or whether I break my leg and need to get around in a different way. So I think some of those things will come through as well.
I just want to make one further observation. In Batavia, we have all these senior living communities and these slow drivers. We have several of them over on our west side, which has Illinois Route 31 through it. And IDOT has just been overwhelmingly supportive of us in the last couple of years. And what we've done is we had a 4-lane highway going through Batavia, and we've now turned it into a 3-lane highway where we have a designated turn lane that goes in. And this goes right by a couple of our very large senior living communities. And we were having accident problems because people were slowly turning in and they were getting rear-ended and whatever have you. since IDOT's helped us do this, we haven't had any accidents. So, I mean, I can't, I really want to express my appreciation to IDOT for the cooperative feel that we're getting from them. And, you know, it's been a good experience to know that we can go to the state and say, here's our problem. We've got this road. We really can't expand it any larger than it is, but can we reconfigure how the lanes work? And we've done it. So I've told several of my neighboring or mayors in their area, because I now, this job, I get the calls, come on over to Batavia and let me show you what we're doing there. And, have the mayor Flossmoor wanting to make an appointment with me to come over and tour our several different things we're doing. But this whole thing about realigning the highways and changing the lanes in them is something that I think has worked working very well.
Very good. Thank you for pointing that out. It's good to hear. Other discussion? All right. Well, thank you, Julie, and thank you, Ryan, for setting the table on this. Really interesting. I think we're all looking forward to what comes next. Thank you. All right. Next, we're going to hear about congestion management strategy, which, as I think we heard, is a bit hand in glove with some of the emerging ideas that we are hearing about. So welcome, Noah.
Great. Good morning, everyone. I'm gonna move this up a little. My name is Noah Harris, and today I'll be giving a presentation on the congestion management strategy. By the end of the presentation, we'll have covered two key things. One, why we're doing this project, including its connections to our federal requirements and to the regional transportation plan. And then two, how we're setting the foundation for future planning work to support implementation after the completion of this specific effort. So first off, we all know that congestion is a significant problem in the region. Every year we see headlines like these reporting that the region has some of the worst traffic congestion in the world. And we also know that no agency can solve these problems alone. And as the MPO for Northeastern Illinois, CMAP is responsible for overseeing a process to bring partner agencies and organizations together to navigate these challenges in collaboration and to ultimately develop a cohesive regional strategy to manage congestion. And throughout the upcoming slides, I'll step through that collaborative process, the required components, and the progress we've made to date. So as I had alluded to, the federal regulations establish the congestion management process as a required component of regional transportation planning for urbanized areas with populations over 200,000. And those regulations emphasize key connections to other transportation planning and programming activities, and particularly to the regional transportation plan. So for example, the CMP should align with and support the advancement of all of our regional transportation planning goals, like those Julie and Ryan walked through, not only those squarely focused on congestion. And additionally, the measures and strategies that make up our CMP can feed directly into the final RTP. And because of these critical connections, we're guided by questions that are not only focused on where congestion is occurring and how to manage it, but more broadly, is the system working for people? Are people able to move around the region and access the destinations they need and want to go to? So the Federal Highway Administration provides what I think is the most useful definition of the CMP, which is a systematic and regionally accepted approach for managing congestion that provides, one, information on system performance, and two, that assesses strategies that meet state and local needs. So most of the required components of the CMP fit into one of those two buckets, either activities related to information on system performance or activities related to the assessment of strategies. So a quick note on clarifying some terminology. You'll hear us talk a lot about the congestion management strategy. That's the name of our current initiative to comprehensively update the region's congestion management process. So the CMP, on the other hand, is the technical name of the federally required ongoing transportation planning activity. And we as CMAP have continuously met ongoing CMP requirements through various staff level activities. However, the region's current documentation dates from 2013, hence the go-to 2040 reference here, the predecessor plan to onto 2050. And this is one of the reasons, but not the only reason, why we're pursuing this comprehensive update. So FHWA also provides guidance documentation that outlines what they call their 8-step process model for congestion management. The first steps are to establish the objectives and the network and the performance measures. So the objectives establish the desired outcomes to be achieved through the process, which again should be consistent with those broader RTP goals. The network identifies the geographic area of application and the system components to which this process applies. And for our region, this is the 7-county metropolitan planning area, focusing in on critical components of the regional transportation system. And the performance measures help assess progress towards meeting the objectives over time. And these are really essential components of a data-driven, performance-based approach to congestion management. With these parts of the process established, the next steps are to collect data and monitor system performance and to analyze congestion problems and needs. And the final 3 steps are focused in on strategies. So identifying and assessing strategies, programming and implementing strategies, and finally evaluating strategy effectiveness. And those last 3 strategy-oriented steps are those that we're particularly excited to focus in on for this comprehensive update that we're going through. So on the slide here are preliminary objectives based on some initial meetings we've had with a resource group made up of subject matter experts and key partners and organizations who are helping to guide this work, as well as additional stakeholder outreach. And while they're still in development, we did want to provide them here to paint a picture of the types of objectives we're headed towards with this process. And I won't go through the whole list, but some examples include enhancing access to jobs and destinations, enhancing transit and active transportation options, improving reliability, reducing the impacts of weather events and construction and other incidents, and more. So with those objectives in mind, we can transition into collecting data and monitoring system performance and analyzing congestion problems and needs. So these steps in the process will use our data and our performance measures to identify the congestion problems, locate the problem areas. So in other words, where are the problems most severe, and to identify root causes. So what's causing the congestion? Is it crashes? Is it weather? Is it signals? Is it lack of multimodal options, et cetera? And all of this information will support the identification of what we've been calling priority corridors. So these are the corridors in the region that are most in need of congestion management planning. And it's these corridors where we can work towards planning and implementing the congestion management strategies themselves. So what are the congestion management strategies? The federal regulations require the establishment of a methodology to identify strategies, and we have room as a region to develop a methodology that is both comprehensive and flexible based on our unique needs. We've studied that federal guidance and the historical evolution of this process and peer MPO practices to develop an understanding of what this could look like. And especially recognizing that we have limited funding and that we won't be able to build our way out of congestion, we hope to establish a methodology to identify strategies that are cost effective, that are right-sized to their context, especially considering different facility types and different land use contexts, and that are consistent with those regional transportation planning goals. And on the next slides, I'll share 2 peer MPO examples that stood out to demonstrate options for the types of approaches we could take here. So the Southern California Association of Governments in Los Angeles has what they call a mobility pyramid for congestion management. Towards the bottom of the pyramid, you'll see system preservation and monitoring and maintenance and evaluation, and working upwards from there. The pyramid includes strategy types like smart land use and demand management, ITS and incident management and operational improvements, And finally, at the top of that pyramid, it concludes with system completion and expansion. So these strategy types are organized in a way that encourages consideration first for those strategies that are most likely to be aligned with the region's transportation planning goals, that might be more cost effective, especially considering limited funding, before considering those strategies that might be more expensive or more complex or less aligned with all of our planning goals. So similarly, the Met Council has what they call their congestion management toolbox, and this one works from top to bottom. The toolbox first recommends strategies to reduce vehicle miles traveled, strategies to shift single occupancy vehicle trips to other modes and to high occupancy vehicle trips where possible, strategies to improve operations, and then finally considering capacity expansion where necessary. The federal regulations for strategy identification lay out a similar tiered approach like this, and we'll look to develop an approach similar to these, but uniquely tailored for our region, as SCAG and Met Council have done for their regions. So the project will result in 2 primary deliverables that will be available to the region and the partners to support implementation. One is a strategies guidebook, and the second is the comprehensive corridor study template. The guidebook will lay out the suite of options for congestion management strategies aligned with those tiers and provide guidance on the process to assess right-sized strategies. And the corridor study template will establish a framework for regional collaboration, emphasizing especially multi-jurisdictional and multi-agency coordination for the planning and implementation of those strategies, and especially at the corridor level. Finally, just a quick look at timeline and next steps. So we launched the resource group this past summer and have worked with them over several meetings to develop objectives and the network and performance measures. Now we're focusing on establishing the process to analyze congestion and on developing those resources, the strategies guidebook and the corridor study template. Once those processes are established and the resources are available, we're going to move into corridor evaluations, working towards a suite of evaluated and ranked corridors by the end of this year. And those are the corridors we would look to prioritize for additional planning for potential implementation of the strategies. We'll return to the committee later this year seeking feedback on those resources that are developed and on the next steps. So with that, yeah, hopefully that was a helpful overview. Happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. So I'll open up with a couple of questions. So when do we get the strategies?
Yeah, great question. So we're working on the strategies guidebook now with the goal of having that wrapped up this summer.
Okay,
so
so that'll be the end. The strategies will be presented at that time?
In the guidebook, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Can you talk a little bit about, certainly the conversation around congestion pricing comes up, and I'd be curious to hear your perspective on, let's say, the New York case, right? In terms of there's a certain geography and density of congestion that they have in New York and placing congestion pricing on it. And then the back and forth with the FHWA, where now with a change in leadership there, I'd be curious about whether those tools we think would remain available and kind of where the New York model ended up. And then part B, how you think that applies to the Chicagoland area, because I think the nature of our congestion is a little bit different, and how our roadways are used, the size of blocks, all of those things. So you may not have the answers to those, but I'd be interested in your perspective if you've got one.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't think I have the answers to all of them. What I will say is a critical connection we see between this effort and the regional transportation plan is we want to identify those strategy types that would fall highest on that kind of hierarchy. So pricing might be an example of a strategy that we know might be aligned with the goals or might be most effective for the region, but that requires more exploration, right? So then we want to pick up those strategies that get identified in this effort in the regional transportation plan for further development, further consideration. So that would include thinking about peer examples and peer experiences and unique applications for our region. So I think that is a conversation we hope to carry between this effort and into the RTP.
Great.
Yeah, let me hop in here too, because I think we agree, right? We're not New York with this sort of massive, like highly dense population in a very small area, although we do have a big population. For a long time, our agency's been talking about how do we manage congestion by thinking about a series of connected managed lanes across the system, where the goal isn't about raising revenue, but the goal is about providing consistent, reliable travel times for regional stakeholders. And I think at the same time, we've also really prioritized this idea that if that something like that should happen in the region, that we're thinking about parallel transit service, right? So that we're thinking about the equity components of these systems. And I think we're excited about this process too, because we'd love to be more engaged on the corridor planning side of things so that we can help think about bringing our transit partners and our road partners together as per some of the report recommendations that we've had, so that we can do that pre-planning and have these more cohesive, successful corridors that get people to where they need to go. Did you have?
Thank you for your presentation. It reminds me of a question I have every time I'm going down a narrow residential street stuck behind an Amazon truck making a delivery. Or alternately, look out my window because the delivery is to my house and see the cars backed up behind the Amazon truck. But then I think, well, they're going to make 50 deliveries that day. And does that mean there are 50 trips to a store that did not take place? And I just wonder if you or anybody else has addressed this issue of the effect of online shopping, net effect of online shopping on VMT.
Yeah, that's a great question, a complex question that I don't have an easy answer for you, but we do know that travel behavior is changing in major ways, and we want to keep those dynamics in mind when we think about strategies. I should say that a lot of this corridor planning work is looking towards major components of the regional transportation system. So less focused on kind of those neighborhood streets, but I do think your question is worth continued exploration and something I know the team is already thinking a lot about. And it's a part of that step in the process that's labeled analyze congestion problems and needs. So what's causing congestion? Are changes in travel behavior, changes in online ordering impacting congestion? That totally fits within the process.
I also remember the Amazon truck is an electric vehicle and reduces pollution. So I don't know.
No, it's a great set of questions because I think also as we think about autonomous vehicles and deadheading around as, they're waiting for pickups. I think your point is a good one, and it makes me think about, I think a comment earlier about, thinking about it's not a one size fits all. So I hope as you're thinking about the strategies, and we know a situation in Batavia is different than a situation, in Chicago. I hope that the strategies also think about the scale and differences that are happening there. And then what's germane here in Chicago is also the backups on the residential streets. And so it's sort of, some of this seems like you got a good chunk of the middle mile, but it's also the last mile piece that I think is really critical, right? And it's not only the travel lane, right, but it's the curb lane, the most contested space in any kind of urban setting. So I'd be interested in kind of the scales at which these applications could be applied, and then some of the nuances that I guess from a statewide perspective we think about, where in Joliet I have one-way streets going down the middle of Main Street, and it's becomes the truck route, and that is a totally different quality to congestion and also safety that is applicable in some places in this region, but not everyone. So I know it makes it more complex. But as you're thinking about strategies, I'll be interested in having an array of tools that allow me to say, what's the criteria that it's meeting here in this kind of municipality or county? And these tools are applicable in that context. And then here's another one. So again, I encourage you to move as quickly as you can. Nobody likes congestion on this, because I think we're all very interested in the strategies you come out with. Cool. Are there other questions or discussion? Yes.
I'd actually really like to kind of follow up on one thing you just said, is the fact that it's not the same in all the communities. But one of the things that I kept seeing in there, ITS deployments, right, and collaborating
getting consistent ITS deployments, that's probably not as important as the collaboration and how we operate. Right now, all of our roads, IDOT's roads operate as IDOT's roads. The county's roads operate as the county's roads. The local, the municipal arterials operate as their roads, and then the neighborhood streets, to your point, you can't even really account for them, right? But a number of the counties and IDOT and a number of towns all have a common, traffic operations software right now. Lake, DuPage, Naperville, Aurora, Highland Park, Lombard, we're all actually operating the same traffic management system right now, separately, right? And the collaboration really needs to come on the operational side. If we can get, 8 or 9 years ago, the counties floated an idea to IDOT about having a regional traffic management center where we could work together to, to actually break down those jurisdictional boundaries. The drivers don't care if they're driving on, Route 38 or if they're driving on Wolf Road. It doesn't matter to them, right? They just want to get from point A to point B without the delay. And breaking down that barrier and saying, hey, we can have a unified system where it's not an IDOT route, it's not a county route, it's a Chicagoland route. Operationally, I think what you're going to find is the strategy for improving congestion when you deploy the technology, it's just technology. It doesn't do anything. The brain power of, the staff at the different agencies working together is going to be the tool that actually solves some of the traffic flow problem, to the mayor's point, and making sure that we still have that understanding locally of what's going to happen. So I'd encourage you to put that, operational piece is the next step, but it's an important piece to making it successful. And DuPage had one question about, how the congestion piece, how are you, and maybe this is the piece that's coming next, how are you tracking, how are you identifying, collecting that data, in terms of what is congestion, right?
Yeah, first, just to respond to the first piece, thanks so much for that feedback. That's really, really helpful to hear. And that is a narrative that has emerged pretty strongly from the resource group as well. The need for multi-agency and multi-jurisdiction collaboration around the operations piece. I think that's been a really rich area of discussion, and we hope to carry that forward. On the second question, the way the process is laid out, there are performance measures associated with each of the objectives. And so we have identified a process basically to collect data to run those performance measures, and we're going to use that information to identify those corridors with most significant need in terms of planning and pursuit of the strategies. So the short answer is there are measures associated with each of the objectives that inform the identification of congestion.
So we've been on a couple different projects. We've been using big data like INRIX and streetlights and some of those sources. And it's amazing what you can get out of that. And it just shows you the hotspots. You don't have to come up with your own metrics. You don't have to do your own data collection. You don't have to worry about corridors because you're getting the entire region. You're getting the neighborhood streets. You may not get the Amazon truck, but you're understanding what's happening on all those streets without doing the data collection. That's already happening. And so give some thought to maybe the resource, the financial resource that you put into this might be best served, getting big data. 10 years ago, it was garbage, but now it's really high quality, in terms of travel times, delays, all the metrics that you had up on the screen, you're just going to get them. So give some thought to that.
That's great. Great comments. Dig. Thank you.
Thanks, Noah. I was seeing the pyramid you shared about, and you mentioned like root causes of congestion in the pyramid from LA. I wanted to just spend a minute on land use planning, which was like a third level of that pyramid. I know it's cliche, right? But like at the root of all transportation is land use planning. People have to get from somewhere to somewhere else. And therefore the root of all congestion is land use planning. And that like, why are we traveling? And as the secretary and executive director and others said, how do we make sure in this process that we recognize that, there's one definition of congestion, which is maybe the traditional definition of like very high vehicle hours traveled per vehicle mile traveled, right? The anecdote, oh my God, it took me a mile to get from CDOT to a mile from CDOT. And yet LaSalle Street is scores very highly on destinations per mile, right? It has an incredible amount of opportunity. It's high location efficiency, right? You have so many things that in that mile, well, great, whatever it is. The other definition of congestion, I think that isn't talked about as much, but I think it's captured in that land use pyramid, is very high VMT per trip. Right? The anecdote of a 5 miles to get a gallon of milk. Those two things need like very, very different strategies in your strategy toolbook, because you're one, land use is very primed to serve that need, right? Connecting people to destinations and opportunities. And in another, right, land use is set up in a very different way that overcoming that friction of distance is a challenge. So it's sort of a question comment just to say that I think unpacking or understanding those different typologies, streets and corridors, as you do this ranking of corridors, where access to destinations that exist is really like that friction is creating friction with mobility. Whereas you have other corridors that are maybe, as we heard about in Batavia, right now you have IDOT route that's also the front door to some of your older living communities. Very different set of challenges where that regional movement now is in friction with people, growing their community, finding new places to live. Then you have the interstate system, which really has no destination on it at all, right? It serves purely as a conduit for movement and mobility between those regional and sub-regional, state, national scales, where, congestion really is just time wasted in traffic because you're trying to get to the next off-ramp to get to those lower order systems. So to the extent you can help unpack as a regional system of communities, downtown centers, suburban centers, the interplay between the downtown Chicago and the rest of the region, it may help us talk and have that vocabulary of talking about, it's like good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, right? Like, what are these different manifestations of congestion, and where are those root causes coming from, those different, forces in tension with each other?
Thank you, Vig. And we'll end. We'll get you out of here soon. But I think part of that is helping as we sort of dial into what congestion means and the experience of it, that there are some places where we want friction. We want people to slow down and stop on a main street. We want to have a little bit of congestion necessarily isn't the worst thing, right? If we're on the expressway system, we want to get to where we're trying to get to. But I think, the level of service application where it's an A or an F, and if everything can't be an A and an F doesn't mean failure, it's just how it's been organized historically as a set of categories of experience. So I'm super interested in places, I think it's at Oregon or other states that have looked at level of comfort, right, as a corollary to level of service. And then you have a more nuanced understanding that we actually want you to go slower here. We don't want you barreling down Main Street. So maybe as you're thinking about this, I think is sort of an underpinning, I guess, in what Vig was saying. How do we better understand that the fact of going slow isn't necessarily a bad thing in all circumstances? In some, we don't want it, but in others, how do we provide some nuance, I guess, to thinking about congestion that way? That scrolls all the way up, right, into these different experiences that are happening all over the state and certainly in this area. So, all right, more questions, discussion? Anyone want to keep going? No? Okay. Thank you. Really, really wonderful presentation. I think obviously spurred a lot of thoughts. So thank you to the team here. All right. Next item, we have 5.03 with a federal and state advocacy agenda legislative update from John Carpenter. John, you're up.
Good morning. Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you today to present the 2025-2026 federal and state legislative advocacy agendas and provide a legislative update. CMAP reviews and updates the federal and state agenda every 2 years, and I'll provide some background on our approach, some highlights from the previous agenda, and an overview over the latest version of this year's agenda. As background, the agenda is developed every 2 years in alignment with federal and state legislative sessions. As with last year, we focused recommendations in 3 areas of our strategic direction: transportation, climate, and regional economic competitiveness. We also look through the lens of our regional policy priorities. Next slide. To develop our advocacy agenda, we not only consider ongoing initiatives and how they may inform recommendations, but also consider how we can utilize CMAP's levers to support implementation of these recommendations. To that end, the advocacy agenda serves as a tool to inform policymakers and elected officials with actions they can take to effectuate change in alignment with our regional priorities. Those recommendations aren't so specific to pertain to specific legislation, but also aren't so broad that it's challenging to measure progress on a given issue. Each agenda typically has a theme. The theme of the last agenda was promoting a robust economic recovery from the pandemic. This agenda, which was developed in the second half of last year, acknowledges we are heading into a time of economic uncertainty, particularly with the expiration of federal aid and the rapidly evolving political environment. Next slide. Just a few examples of items from our previous agenda that have been successfully implemented: the carbon reduction program into our CMAQ programming, and the Office of Multimodal Freight has been established within US DOT. Next slide. The 2023-2024 advocacy agenda accomplishments include the PART report, which itself helped us achieve one recommendation around identifying a series of sustainable revenue sources for the region's transit system. Several items included in that report have been incorporated into the most recent advocacy agenda as recommendations, which I'll deal with a little bit later. Next slide. We view investing in CMAP as investing in the region. The top priority in our advocacy agenda is securing a dedicated $2 million annual state appropriation to support our technical assistance offerings and non-transportation related work. We are shifting this ask this year a bit to really focus on growing our technical assistance program, and we're calling it the Strengthening Communities Initiative. Technical assistance applications continue to outpace the resources we have available to meet local needs, and there are continued requests for work on housing, economic development, water quality, and that we don't have the resources to support. This is at the top of our agenda this year. Representative Will Davis has introduced House Bill 3784, and he recently hosted a legislative briefing with members of the General Assembly in the region to provide us an opportunity to share more about how additional resources could support our technical assistance offerings. House Bill 3784 has garnered bipartisan support and co-sponsorship of legislators across the region. We see up this legislation is appealing to all parts of these 7 counties. Also, the Illinois Municipal League and the Illinois State Association of Counties have voiced their support for the legislation. The bill was recently assigned to the House Appropriations, Public Safety and Infrastructure Committee, and we're working with the committee chair to schedule a subject matter hearing on this legislation. Next slide. As you all know, our current surface transportation bill will expire next year. The principles from our previous effort, called One Regional Voice, helped inform some of the content of this most recent advocacy agenda. We are also looking to have a similar dialogue in the near future with all of you about what the region would like to see as the surface transportation authorizations conversations get underway. We'll be talking more about that later on. Next slide. As I said, there are 3 focus areas that our agenda deals with. The first area is transportation. Sustainably funding our transportation system compromises a large share of the recommendations in the transportation section of the agenda, given the imminent fiscal cliff our transit system faces. The agenda elevates policy recommendations from our PART report, particularly around some of the funding options and system improvements detailed in the report, and recommendations from the speed management report, so decision makers have a better sense of how they can contribute to a safe systems approach. The next area, next slide is climate. The first component of the climate recommendations in the agenda are around enhancing resilience and reducing emissions and congestion. Of note to this group, this is where we have some language about strategies to reduce emissions from the transportation sector and making more resources available to accomplish these efforts. The second component is around integrated water resources management. We recently published a paper looking for regional groundwater governance solutions. This will be one place where we will look to how we can move some of the advocacy agenda recommendations to the implementation stage. Next slide. The final focus area is regional economic competitiveness. Building on the tremendous success of the Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership, there are several opportunities for state and federal decision makers to support inclusive economic growth for the region. Recommendations in this section touch on several different sectors, including economic development, housing, and modernizing tax policy. Related to the transportation sector, we also have recommendations to strengthen and improve the efficiency of the movement of goods throughout the region. Finally, I'll give the next slide a legislative update. As far as the federal legislative updates, the next surface transportation reauthorization process is currently underway. CMAP staff is developing a shared principles guide for the region's next reauthorization bill. This guide will outline key policy priorities and be presented to the region's congressional delegation. Included in your packet of materials is CMAP's most recent update on executive orders and federal directives. FHWA headquarters previously issued guidance to its field offices requiring all division offices to forward all STIP amendments to the Office of General Counsel at USDOT for review and approval. However, on February 28th, 2025, it was announced that USDOT will no longer require amendments to state transportation funding plans to be reviewed in Washington, and new guidance is in the process of being drafted. State legislative update. As far as the state legislative updates, State Senator Ram Villavalam and Representative Marcus Evans filed legislation addressing the future of transit in Northeastern Illinois in partnership with the Labor Alliance for Public Transit. In addition to certain governance reforms and improvements to the region's transit system, the bill also calls for the creation of a road user charge advisory committee to devise a structure for a RUC pilot in Illinois. This bill includes one seat for CMAP. CMAP staff will continue reviewing the bill for its alignment to the plan of action for regional transit and will provide feedback to legislators as they request it. CMAP staff continues to track legislation before the Illinois General Assembly that impacts the region and is relevant to CMAP's work. Included in your memo are a list of bills that may be of interest to the MPO Policy Committee. Thank you for your time and happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for John? All right, thank you so much. Very helpful. Okay, on to item 6. Is there any other business before this committee? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 7, which is public comment. So we'll take public comments from individuals who are in the audience first, and then followed by any remote participants. So are there any comments from the public? All right, not seeing any. Are there any comments remote?
We do have Garland Armstrong.
Hi, everyone. It's Garland Armstrong, formerly of Des Plaines and Elmwood Park, now living in Des Moines, Iowa. How's everybody doing in the Chicagoland area?
Good. We're good, sir.
All right. My wife and I, just deeply concerned about the Amtrak. She's deeply concerned about Amtrak. So I'll let my wife explain to y'all. Hold on, and then I'll say something next.
It's about what I'm concerned about is that the Amtrak doesn't go through Des Moines to Omaha, and we needed to go through Des Moines instead of where it really goes on the south side.
Osceola.
To Osceola, because there's no way to get there. And if you guys were gonna come out here, there's no way to there's no way to really get up here from the buses. I mean, from the train. And I think you guys need to rearrange the California Zephyr. Instead of going to southeast Illinois, northeast Illinois, northeast, southeast Iowa, and southern Iowa, I think you need to make it go into Davenport, Iowa City, and Des Moines, and then to Omaha. Because that way people can get there that way. And I told this to my congressman, and he said he would talk to them, but it seems like nothing is working. So that's my concern about Amtrak.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. We
Yeah.
really appreciate your-
Yep, and I'm also definitely concerned about for especially what is happening right now, and especially for the ADA there. I hope the ADA and CMAP is working together to make sure that there'll be good funding for it, because we need accessibility on everything, because there's not enough, and people with disabilities can't be normal, don't have enough to be a part of society. So I hope there'll be good training for them, and make sure to be extremely well prepared if the unthinkable does happen. How can they be extremely well prepared, and make sure there's a lot of transparency, because there's not enough transparency for the ADA, and also communicate with them in other languages if they need to know what's going to be happening next down the road. So I think they need all the help they could get, and how to get well prepared so that they won't be disconnected or be ignored. So I hope y'all in different municipalities and everything to make sure wherever some of the disabilities in your counties, to make sure that they have access to it and be well informed, because God forbid they don't want to hear the word lawsuit and say, y'all haven't done nothing yet. So make sure that they are well informed, have enough transparency, be communicated so they can be a part of it, so they can figure out what's next to help y'all. So this is teamwork. So everyone needs to step up to the plate and make sure that they are well informed. And I want to know that they said Garland has finally said it right for us. So make sure that you have a backup plan, and make sure that this is definitely going to be a miracle of them all for them. So
Thank you, Garland.
I'll be
Thank
glad
you
if there's any questions or comments about that.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to share these comments with us, you and Heather. Thank you so much.
All right.
All right. Any other? And that ends our public testimony. Item 8, next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for June 12th, 2025. And can I get a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Shelkey, moved by Mr. Beal. All in favor? All
Aye.
right. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Meeting's adjourned.